Okay, perfect. Okay, looks like everyone is in. Hello, everyone. You're on mute, so if you're saying hello to me, I won't hear you, unfortunately, but I know that you're here in presence. I'd like to welcome you and Concentra as well. So as a client in our meetings, we've spoken about this concept of a trust company taking on the role of executor in your will and power of attorney. And so I thought it would be of great value to invite Concentra as a presenter today to discuss their role as or what they do as an institution and things that you can think of when trying to decide if a third party executor is the right decision for you. And so I'll just get right to it. So I'll introduce the three presenters. We have Jandy John, who's the Director of Estates and Trusts. We have Rachel Osho, that she is the Trust and Exec and Estates Coordinator, and Vadim, who's the Senior Trust and Estates Advisor. So I'll just roll it on to you guys. A bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, there is a Q&A button at the top of the screen. You could just press that and type your question. And if timing works, we'll interrupt, or otherwise we'll wait until the end of the presentation and just go through all of the questions. If we do not have time to answer all of the questions, we'll be sure to deal with those individually as well after the fact. So without further ado, I'll roll it on to you guys, and you can take it from here.
Thank you for having us here today. Really appreciate it. So I'm Jandy. I'm the Director of Estates and Trust for Concentra Trust. My two co-presenters will introduce themselves later as they speak. So before we get started, I want to just let you know that this presentation is for information purposes only and not intended to be tax and legal advice. We always do that disclaimer, and we'll have it in the presentation also. So without further ado, so today, what we want to talk about, we want to just introduce ourselves as a trust company, tell you a little bit about Concentra Trust, and what it means to be an executor and being an executor, and what to consider when you want to appoint an executor, so the role of executor, and finally conclude with why professional executors sometimes make sense for state administration. So I'm going to hand it over to Rachel now to talk about Concentra Trust.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Jandy, for starting off. My name is Rachel. I am the Trust and Estates Coordinator at Concentra Trust, and I'm just going to talk a bit about Concentra. So we are a national trust company, which means that we provide trust and estate solutions to all the provinces in Canada besides Quebec, which runs under civil law administration. Concentra Trust has been a national trust company since 1952, which means that we've been providing trust and estate solutions for over 70 years. Under Concentra Trust management, we currently have 42 billion and 1 billion in custody. Concentra Trust is Canada's 7th largest trust company, which means that we do have quite a number of files that we administer and clients that we service. And so next, I'm just going to hand it over to my colleague who will talk about being an executor.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming in and joining the presentation. My name is Vadim. I'm a Senior Estates and Trust Advisor here at Concentra Trust. And let's start from the very beginning and the very basics. What is an executor? So an executor is somebody that is appointed in the will by the will maker, or the testator as we call them, is appointed in the will, is somebody that controls asset distribution, executes estate in the strict accordance with the will, and according to the letter of the will, handles all the communication, becomes a center point of communication between the beneficiaries and all the interested parties, as well as all the parties and professionals that are helping in estate administration. And they're also entitled to receive compensation for the time and effort they show and spend administering the estate. Now, going rate for executorship compensation, if you appoint a family friend or a relative, for example, is around 5%. It can go up to 5% on the entire value of the estate. Now that you've identified someone that you dislike strong enough to ask them to be your executor, and identified that they like you enough to agree, but all kidding aside, it is, first of all, a burden and not a privilege. What responsibilities and what wave of responsibilities does befall an executor? First and foremost, an executor secures upon passing and when the inevitable happens, they locate and secure the estate assets. They handle probate application and organization of all tasks required to complete estate administration, including paying all debts, talking and organizing the process in symbiosis with all the lawyers, accountants, real estate agents if needed, and so on and so forth. Depending on complexity of the file and the types of the assets, executor might perform such tasks as, if there's a rental property, for example, they may work with rent collection, and if there's a vacant property, for example, they might go and visit and make sure that the property is winterized so that the pipes don't burst and things of similar sort. The last point here is something that I wanted to address, is a common misconception about appointments. Somebody thinks that if you appoint a family member or a family friend, for example, executor, and if they agree, it means that they automatically act and it's guaranteed. Appointment of executor, even in the will, even with their express consent, does not guarantee that they will act. So therefore our express suggestion is always appoint alternates, and have somebody to pick up the slack if the other person or your first choice or even second choice is unable or unwilling to. Next slide,
Okay,
please.
so before Vadim just brilliantly explained the role of an executor and what an executor does. We want to get into estate administration a little bit, and you can enter your answer in the chat. I can't see the chat, but I'll be interested to see what people say to these questions. So how many tasks are there to complete an estate administration? If we can guess, I'll give you a couple seconds just to enter your answer in the chat. So Michael, what are the numbers we're seeing before I put the answer forward? You're muted.
No responses yet, so maybe we could just put it out there.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so to completely settle an estate, it's over 270 tasks to fully administer an estate. And by an estate, I mean a simple estate where it's spouses and they're leaving everything to each other, and that's the task to complete it. To put that into perspective, let me show you what a checklist looks like that we use to administer an estate. You can see the outline. It outlines in different categories and different tasks. And within each task to complete an estate administration, there are subtasks within those tasks themselves. So it adds up. And if it's a complex estate, if there's property to be sold, if there is a holding company, if there's shares in private company, then this task will grow by 3 times because the different things to do, like winding up companies or anything like that. So that's an example of our executor's checklist. So, Vadim, can you talk about what the individual needs to consider when they are appointing an executor? And I think you're going to go through this and do a case study and make a case study as an example to outline the consideration for an executor.
I'll be happy to. let us see what the next slide holds. All right.
It's there.
Yes. Let's get a bit personal. Have you ever thought to yourself in your succession planning journey, I think I need to hire a professional executive because maybe uh, the work is too much for my family members. What is the difference between a professional executive and a family member or a friend? How does they transpire in real life? What are the benefits of a professional executor anyway? And without further ado, before we dive in any further, let us tell you about a case study. And in this case, it's a case study of Joe. As you can see, Joe has worked really hard in his entire life and is very, very stressed with his estate planning journey. Uh, he's Joe's situation is very, very much not uncommon in Canada amongst Canadian residents and especially residents of GTA. Joe's considering updating his will after his spouse unfortunately passed away. He has one daughter here in Toronto and three grandchildren here. His one son lives in the UK. Obviously loves spending time with his family. He has one grandchild who has special needs. He um, needs to think and take care of that aspect. Obviously love to travel and donates money to his church and other local organization. So he thinks to himself, who would I appoint as executors? And before he can answer that question, there are a couple of considerations that he has to sort of go through. And a lot of people in this case would appoint both their children to be co-executors to ensure, impartiality and balance. But in this case, there are a lot of questions, as I mentioned, to ask himself fairly. First of all, on the family side, first and foremost, will his sons get along even in administering the estate? You see other considerations there. Most importantly, he wants to ensure his children are treated fairly and equally. Regarding responsibility, what if his children are busy enough with their families and work and other full-time obligations to take on such a onerous task properly and make sure that it's all tied up and administered properly and CRA doesn't come knocking 3 years down the road. Regarding asset distribution, will extra care be taken in working with assets of the estate? Maybe not even of maybe not even great assets of great monetary value, because that would be more obvious, but of great sentimental value. What if there's an item in the home that's barely noticeable, is worth nothing to daughter in Toronto, but means everything to the son in the UK? Will the causes be supported with that same level of care that Joe did in his lifetime? Another set of questions, there are a couple of sets of questions here, but another set of questions is when Joe thinks about appointing an executor, maybe not his children, he has to go through this sort of checklist when he thinks, okay, how well will co-executors work together? Will they have time to administer it efficiently, as we mentioned? Are they okay with inherent reliability that comes with authority and responsibility of being an executor? Will the heirs be treated fairly and communicated in a timely fashion? And communication, as we know, is everything. And a lot of questions and disputes can arise just through poor communication. Is executor financially comfortable with accepting some of the out-of-pocket costs, and what will they be reimbursed for? So after all the thought Joe's put in, Joe's probably looking a lot more stressed now, and he gets to evaluate and compare the two, appointing a professional executor versus appointing an individual. So when he appoints an individual executor, he has to evaluate whoever that is, be it his children, be it his family friend, or any relative, maybe his sibling. He has to obviously evaluate the traits. How have they shown themselves over the years? Are they responsible with their own money? Are they responsible with with their own timelines and will have they shown great care in dealing with very, very important tasks. What are the tying the next 2 points together? What are the existing dynamic has been between Joe and the person or people that they were looking to appoint, and will it stay the same with Joe's children now? Will there be any disputes because there was some pre-existing dynamic? What about potential liability? Once again, as I mentioned earlier, are they okay with potential inherent liability? And Joe's estate, as you saw the situation earlier, given all the details, 2 children, 3 grandchildren, one grandchild with special needs. There's a lot of planning to that goes into it. But the most important thing, it's not the easiest and it's not the most expensive, most difficult estate to manage. But would that individual be okay handling the level of difficulty of Joe's estate as it is? Whilst if Joe considers a corporate executor, a professional executor like us, a trust company, what we do is, first of all, we remove the burden of administration from family members, friends. We assume all the liability. We assume all the heavy lifting, allowing family members and friends to grieve and go about their business in their personal lives and full-time obligations. We ensure that the estate is settled right to the letter of the will. We bring expertise, continuity, and peace of mind in carrying out all of Joe's wishes, and therefore making sure that this is one thing that he can put to bed after all of these sets of questions and questionnaires that he was asking himself on who to appoint and how to figure out the succession planning.
Okay, so we talked about Joe and we understand what Joe's dilemma is in appointing an executor. So Joe is unique because he does have children, he does have family members to appoint. So in Joe's case, he did appoint his brother along with the trust company to be his executor. And why Joe did that is a sense of continuity. He knew his sons did not get along, and a lot of families they know what's happening in their families and they think miraculously it'll all be resolved upon death. It doesn't get resolved, believe me. I've seen many years of it not being resolved. So in Joe's case, he knew his sons didn't get along. He knew one son lived out of country, because living out of country and out of province as an executor, it may change the tax liabilities of an estate. So therefore, having someone resident in the province makes sense, but having one son being over the other son did not make sense. We use the term in the States, fair is not always equal, equal is not always fair. And that term rings well when we have siblings that don't get along. So appointing his brother and appointing the trust company made sense for Joe. And there are incidents where having individuals rather than trust company makes the most sense. On a state where it's just 2 spouses, everything is left to each other. They have one child, everything is going to that one child. That makes sense for an individual to be an executor. But in this Joe situation, having that professional executor there is somewhat of an insurance policy. Because what can happen is Joe's brother is older than him. So throughout the administration, the executor has a chance to become incompetent or passing away before the estate administration is settled. So by having the corporate executor there, if Joe Brothers become incompetent, it leaves the professional executor to complete the administration. If Joe's brother passes away before the administration is completed, it leaves the trust company to complete the administration. Because the trust company has a sense of pertinence. They're there, they don't get old, they don't get incompetent, so there's a continuation. They also bring that professionalism to manage expectations. In Joe's son's case, they don't get along. So there's a sense of expectation. The child living in Canada, again, this case study is coming from a real situation. They think the children living outside of the country think there's a favoritism. So as a third party unbiased party to come in. It also helps the family to grieve and have that impartial third party there and to manage disputes between the children. So in case of a professional executor for Joe, it makes sense to have it as a co-executor or even just a backup executor in case the family members were not had a capacity to complete the estate administration. Okay? And as a third party professional executor, we ensure that all the financials are taken care of. We ensure we work with everyone that Joe worked with in his lifetime to ensure there's a continuation with the family, especially because the professional that Joe's work with, they will know the family dynamics and they will know how the family work together. And that brings us into working with advisors and other professionals in the lifetime. When advisors are involved, the advisors and other account management are not disrupted because when someone passes away, typically accounts are frozen. They may have potential to arrange for, there's a potential that there's a support system in place. In Joe's case, he had a son with disability. So having that disability, he was probably a sole provider for his son, for his grandchild, my apologies. So the continuation of payments makes sense. So having an advisor there ensures that there's some continuation also. And if there's a trust created under the will, say that Joe created a trust for his grandchild. Funds could be invested for many years. Having the advisor involved ensures that there's a continuation there also. Same for minor trusts or any other special needs trust that needs to be established. So creating that family experience at the beginning, creating a professional experience and having that professional executive in place, it creates that holistic planning for most people when they want to think about naming their executor and that transition from life to death. Okay.
Okay, and now we're going to bring it back to just a lot more information about Concentra Trust. And I do acknowledge that it's a lot of information that we're sharing at once, but that's where we come in. And as mentioned previously, Concentra Trust has been in this business for over 70 years. And one outstanding factor about Concentra is we do not require custody of your files or of your accounts. Rather, we do not require custody of your accounts. We also work with whatever professionals or the professionals that you work with. We provide best-in-class professional service. And we do look to build relationships with our clients. We also have a vast list of professionals that we onboard depending on the complexities of the files. And moving on. And again, this is the Concentra Trust team. We are here to make your lives easier. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. At Concentra, we have a well-versed team of estates and trust professionals across the country. And we work closely with your wealth advisor as well to help you during this planning process. We have Alex, who covers the BC and Alberta region, and the rest of the team does cover all jurisdictions besides Quebec, as previously mentioned. And yeah, so we're just going to open the floor for questions and discussions. And once again, we thank you for sitting through the presentation. So if you have any questions that may have popped up during the course of us talking about estates and trust and all these different topics, please feel free to ask at this time.
So I have a question here for you. Can you talk about the process of working with Concentra or hiring Concentra? If a client decides they want to use Concentra, what's the process?
I can take that question. Okay. So it's a fairly simple process. We start with, of course, setting up a meeting with the client and our advisors. We will be working closely with your drafting lawyer. So once you have engaged a drafting lawyer, do let us know, and we will provide um, our Concentra documents that should be included in the planning documents. We will also conduct administrative reviews, and so the quicker we're able to receive the draft, the faster the process. Once all the administrative reviews have been conducted and we've answered all the questions and gone through our agreement and fee structure, we will then and once we receive the signed documents, we will respond back with countersigned agreements, and also that concludes the onboarding process. In terms of ongoing communication, we do advise our clients to revisit their estate plan at least every 3 to 5 years. So if any circumstances change, you will have a contact person that you can reach out to. You are under no obligation to have a trust company named at all times. You have that autonomy to review your estate planning as the circumstances change.
And can you speak a bit about the fee structure?
I can take that one, Rachel. So we do have set compensation in place. As Vadim said, in Ontario specifically, the court rates, we call it the court rates, but the court approve is 5%. So if you appoint a cousin, husband, wife, it's going to be 5. They can charge up to 5%. The trust company charges a tiered rate, which is less than the 5%, and is based on the market value. I will say that specifically, but also we have customized fees for assets over $10 million. We do customized fee solutions. So just typically the estate administration fees are based on the market value tiered. The first tier is 4.25% on the first million, 2.25% on the next 4 million, 1% on the balance, and the minimum fee is $20,000. How the estate administration fee is charged at the time Concentra Trust acts, meaning that if you change your will and you move Concentra Trust, there's no fee to Concentra Trust. There is no upfront fee for the work that we do while you're alive in terms of reviewing the documents, ensuring that the documents can be administered as you want them to be administered.
Excellent. Are there any other questions? If you have a question, you can type it into the Q&A bubble at the top of the screen.
While we wait, Michael, if I may add one little thing.
Yes, please.
During the process of consulting with Concentra and during the process of appointing Concentra, one thing that I like to mention strongly is you always have a one point of contact. If you reach out to Jandy or myself, you have a one point of contact that at all points you can, first of all, we will guide you through the process, what is needed at a certain stage. If you have any questions in the interim, we are there to help you at all times up until the file is closed. And once the file is completed, all signed and sealed, if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out. So you always have a trusted advisor in the process alongside yourself, and we don't expect you to remember all the stages of the process right now. As long as you reach out to us and keep us in the loop, we make sure that you're informed.
Perfect. And just to clarify, to be sure that everyone was clear. So in terms of the fee, that is only charged to the estate upon passing of the client. So you're not paying any sort of upfront fees or an annual fee. It's essentially you're naming Concentra in your will, but it's only at the time of death that the fees, the administrative fees would kick in, which would be based on the size of the estate.
Correct. That's correct. I also want to add something to for this for the case of appointing an executor. Vadim mentioned that appointment doesn't mean acting. When you appoint an executor, ensure that that person or the trust company or the professional knows they're being appointed. Because at the time of death, you want them to know that they're going to act. Because if they're not going to act, then that leaves the estate open who's going to act for the estate. And if that's the situation, then there's a whole process on who can administer the estate. So having conversations up front on the appointment makes the most sense, and having them know where that will is kept. Because when we're looking to draft our wills, ensuring that we know where the original is, ensuring, and please don't keep it in safe deposit boxes, ensuring that the lawyer is working with you to do your full plan. And we do work with the clients also at the initial stage to go through their plans and how they want to set up their wills. Do they want to do one will? Do they want to do some trusts in there? Do they want to do primary and secondary? So it's also working with everyone to ensure that they get the best value for what we can bring to them.
Perfect. I have a question here. Someone is asking, they've heard that there is such a thing as an overseer of the executor. So someone who's ensuring that the executor is fulfilling its responsibility. Is that something that you can speak to?
Yeah, there are such roles, typically not Ontario. I don't see a lot of those in Ontario. I see more of those on the BC area where you have a protector kind of role. But ultimately, the decision maker is the executor. There's the recourse for the beneficiaries. Everyone thinks it's the executor that's in control. No, the executor has all the liabilities, but the beneficiaries are in control because the beneficiaries can challenge the executor at any point in the administration and and the executor has to seek approval from the beneficiaries and seek approval from the courts if the beneficiaries do not give their approval. So the word overseer, it's mostly for other provinces, but I don't see a lot of those in Ontario because the courts and the beneficiaries have a lot of control to keep the executor quote unquote honest.
Perfect. And just to clarify, so Concentra serves all of Canada.
Correct.
Now, if you're a client in Ontario, where do meetings typically take place it comes to executing the will?
Okay, it again, it depends on the location. Like, we go to advisor's office, we do virtual, and we also do in our office in Toronto. So it all depends on the client mobility and what's the best for that client. In this role, it's always what is the best for the client and what's the best fit. How does the client want to sign the will? How does the client want to execute? How does the client want to meet? Do they want to meet in their location? Are they mobile? Do they want to come into Toronto? Do we need to go in to their law office, their lawyer's office? Do we go to their advisor's office? It all depends on the beneficiary that directing how they want to go. We do accommodate a lot of different ways in terms of getting. I mean, in our world, it's always putting the client first, and they're not our clients, or they're the advisor's clients, so we would make sure we work with the advisors to ensure that we get the best fit for the client.
Perfect. And in terms of so there have been cases where Concentra is set as the successor executor. And I'm assuming the fee structure is the same as the secondary.
Yes, correct. The roles that the trust companies can play. There are three different roles. There's the sole executor, meaning that the trust company is the first executor and they have all the oversight. There is the co-executor role, where the trust company can be appointed with an individual and they act together. Again, all the burden and responsibility is with the trust company. Then there is the alternate executor, meaning you appoint someone, and if that person, in Joe's case, appoint his brother, and if his brother does not survive or is not able to act, then the alternate being the trust company to act in their capacity as the executor. And for all three roles, the fees are the same because they'll act in one capacity or other, having the full responsibility for the administration.
Perfect.
Mhm.
So I have a somewhat of a mini case study.
Okay.
So someone is asking, so there's a couple, no children, fairly straightforward will, husband and wife, everything is in joint name. So upon the first death, everything rolls over to the spouse. On the second death, or if they um, pass away together, everything rolls over to charity. So in that scenario, does it make sense? Does it still make sense to use a trust company? Or maybe what are the pros of using a trust company in that scenario?
I would say use the trust company as an alternate to spouse. So each spouse acts for each other's first spouse pass, it rolls to the second spouse. It's when that second spouse passes, you have to account to the charities, to the remainder, we call it the remainder beneficiaries, which is the charities, which will want reporting and accounting. So that's when the trust company can act. And the last to die situation, and that's the alternate executive appointment. Because if per person died at the same time, in our world, there's no such thing. You have to determine who dies first. And that's when you start who's going to be the executor. So who dies first, that has to be determined, and the last surviving spouse, that'll be the estate that all of the funds will be paid from.
Perfect.
Does that
I
make
guess,
sense? Did I answer that?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So in a scenario where there is someone who has four grandchildren, one with a disability, so the disabled grandchildren would likely get their inheritance in a trust. Now, would Concentra in that scenario would act as a trustee to the estate, but they can also act as the trustee to the trust to ensure that the grandchild's assets are protected. Can you
Yes.
speak to that?
Yes, I've been waiting to address that question, to be honest, because it is a mini case, and it is once again very much not uncommon. I want to say this one warrants a preliminary call or a video chat with a member of our team. We will provide a non-legal advice and see what your options are, and most definitely, you'll need a legal advice, and in whichever order that you wish to speak to us and your lawyer, um, please do, and we would be happy to learn more about your situation to provide the appropriate advice. And in this case, we need a bit more information, and there are a couple of options that can be done. That's first of all. That would be your first avenue to have a in-depth conversation with a member of our team for non-legal advice, more practical one, and how it's actually gonna transpire into life, and your lawyer, and see how it's see how it once again transpires. And there was another question by Dale Lang that I wanted to not to go unnoticed. Dale asked, they need to get a new will. Are you appointed first or after? If you are asking if we're appointed first before the will is signed or after, we're appointed during the process. So we're including during the process of your conversations with your lawyer. So before you sign your new will, we, as Rachel mentioned earlier, we have a conversation, we determine if we're the best fit or not, and if we are, then you introduce us to your lawyer. We provide everything that the lawyer needs, the clauses. We sign a couple of the compensation agreement with you. We get information from you so that the estate administration, when the inevitable happens, is efficient. And that's why you involve us during, and we get to review the draft will before signing, so that you don't end up having to pay extra legal fees for reproducing a new will, if or amending anything in the existing will, if it was signed without with something inappropriate. I'll give you one quick example where client came to us and said, "Hey, we appointed you guys, whatever agreements that we need to sign, information we need to provide. Please give us the forms and we'll provide." And then I review the will and it says Concentra Financial. Well, there's no Concentra Financial that is going to provide the service, and that's where they had to go back to the lawyer, change the name to the appropriate one, and insert the clauses. So in order to mitigate those types of scenarios, please include us during the in the process, and we'll be happy to guide you through.
Can I add one thing to what Vadim was saying? Back to the trust for the disabled child. A trust company can act one or two ways in that capacity. If there is an estate to be settled and a resulting trust, the trust company doesn't have to act on the estate, but they can be the trustee of that resulting trust for the child. We call those trusts Henson Trusts, and those trusts are called Henson Trust because of a case that was done many years ago in St. Catharines or Kitchener, and it's a fully discretionary trust. That's the correct terminology. And what that does is it protects the child with disability, the person with disability, to maintain whatever ODSP benefits they have. So it's a trustee and a Henson Trust. You have to ensure that any payments made from that trust is paid in accordance with what Ontario disability payouts will cover, not to jeopardize those payments. So a trust company can definitely act, and it's more beneficial to have a trust company in those trusts because they understand what goes on with ODSP, they understand the language, and they understand what needs to happen not to compromise those kind of trusts. And it also has a continuation that those trusts can last for years and years. Just to have that continuation also, it makes a lot of sense to have a trust company involvement. And if you want a family member also, you can add a family member on as an advisor, so the trust company can talk to the family member as an advisory role.
Perfect. I have a final question for you, Jenny. We were speaking earlier about the option of adding someone someone as an agent to the estate. So what that means is you made your child an executor, you pass away, your child begins the process and feels like it's beyond their ability, or they maybe just don't have time to execute the will. So they can, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they can hire Concentra at that point as well to essentially jump in and take over the responsibility.
Exactly. Agent for executor, we do provide that service. And I know that we talk about Concentra a lot, but when you hire a professional executor, engage who you're comfortable with, right? We are here to help you and provide for you. And I would love for you to hire Concentra, but hire who you're comfortable with. Let's stay first. So Concentra I can act as an agent for. So if you're not even if yourself is acting as the executor and you find it overwhelming and you're not able to complete the task, we can step in as your agent for executor. And if there's a resulting trust as a result of the estate, we can act as your agent for trustee. So there's always that agency where you have all the responsibility and you still have the title as executor trustee. The trust company can be your agent for and complete the entire administration on your behalf.
Perfect. Okay, so I guess we can call it at that. If anyone is interested in,
There's one question that I don't know if you answered. Can we store the will with the government?
oh,
Was that answered?
no,
No, it wasn't.
Okay. Not quite understanding what that means because the capacity to store a will with the government is if someone is incompetent and the public guardian and trustee has the will and have records of the will. typically when you draft your will, the drafting lawyer will keep the original, or the person will keep the original in their homes. Or if you name a trust company, the trust company may keep the original. I would always strongly recommend never, ever, ever store your original will in a safe deposit box, because you can't get to it without the will. So it's like a cycle of chicken egg, so you cannot get that will unless you have a copy, and then they don't accept the copy. So either store it with the drafting lawyer, store it at home, let your executor know where you're keeping that will, or store it, if you name a trust company, store it with the trust company that is named in the will.
And I
Okay?
just
I
wanted
think
to
that's
add,
what
because I just wanted to add something, because we have received that question quite often, is when the will is stored with the trust company, it's at no cost. There's no cost to have your will stored with us. It is a complimentary service. So I just wanted to mention that, so we have that in mind.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay, so I guess we could end it at that. Thank you very much to the three of you from Concentra, and for everyone that joined the call. If this is something that we want to explore further, I would be more than happy to connect you to Concentra. And then from that point on, it's between you and Concentra. And but we can continue the conversation in future meetings for sure. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and we will see you soon.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.